Sarah Chen stood at the observation deck of Station Gamma 7, her reflection ghosted against the starfield beyond. The news bulletin played on repeat behind her, the alien newscasters' translated words cutting through her like plasma fire. Marcus Chen, human colonist, has been sentenced to life imprisonment on charges of terrorist activity against the Xerian Mining Consortium. The defendant was found guilty of sabotaging 3 mining platforms, resulting in the deaths of 47 Xerian workers. The coffee cup in Sarah's hand cracked under the pressure of her grip. 23 years she had served the Terran Defense Corps. 23 years of being humanity's sword in the darkness, the ghost that made alien warlords wake up screaming. And now they had taken the one thing that mattered more to her than breathing. Her son was innocent. She knew it with the same certainty that told her when an enemy sniper had her in their crosshairs. Marcus was many things: stubborn, idealistic, sometimes reckless, but he was not a killer. At 25, he had followed his conscience to Xerian Prime, working with refugee groups to help displaced populations. The boy who used to cry when he accidentally stepped on insects was not capable of mass murder. The communication panel chimed. Sarah turned, her reflection replaced by the stern face of Admiral Morrison, her commanding officer and oldest friend. His expression told her everything before he spoke. "Sarah, I know what you're thinking, don't." "They railroaded him, Jim. The trial lasted 6 hours. 6 hours for a case that should have taken weeks to properly examine." Her voice remained steady, professional, but Morrison had known her long enough to recognize the warning signs, the stillness before the storm. The Xerian legal system operates differently than ours. Their efficiency is a joke. Sarah moved away from the window, her military bearing making her seem to glide rather than walk. 3 witnesses who all happen to work for the mining consortium that's been trying to evict the refugee camps for months. Security footage that conveniently malfunctioned during the supposed sabotage. And a defense attorney who met with my son for exactly 17 minutes before the trial. Morrison's jaw tightened. The diplomatic corps is working on it. Ambassador Kellison thinks she can arrange an appeal. Kellison couldn't negotiate her way out of a paper bag, and we both know it. Sarah reached her desk, where a holographic display showed the tactical layout of Xerian Prime. She had been studying it for the past 72 hours, memorizing guard rotations, security protocols, and structural weaknesses. Old habits. "Sarah, look at me." Morrison's voice carried the weight of command. "I know what you're capable of. Hell, the entire galaxy knows what you're capable of. But if you go rogue, if you violate Xerian sovereignty, it won't just be your career on the line. It could mean war." She finally met his eyes through the hologram. Morrison had been there when she earned her callsign Reaper during the Proxima conflict. He had seen her walk into a fortified bunker complex alone and emerge 3 hours later with 67 enemy combatants neutralized and the hostages safe. He knew exactly what she was capable of when someone threatened her family. Then maybe they should have thought about that before they decided to frame an innocent human for their crimes. The transmission ended abruptly. Sarah stood alone in her quarters, surrounded by commendations, medals, and photos of Marcus through the years. His graduation from the Colonial Academy. His first day working with the Refugee Assistance Program. His last message to her, full of hope about the difference he was making. The Xerian authorities had made a critical error in judgment. They had assumed that one human, even a decorated soldier, would bow to their corrupt system. They had clearly never studied Earth's military history. Humans had a peculiar trait that other species found difficult to understand. They became exponentially more dangerous when you threatened their children. Sarah began pulling items from her personal locker. Her custom armor, painted matte black and scarred by countless battles. Her plasma rifle, modified with targeting systems that made it accurate at ranges that defied Xerian understanding. Her combat knives, forged from Terran steel that could cut through alien composite armor like tissue paper. Most importantly, she retrieved a small device that officially didn't exist. The neural interface link that connected directly to her brain, allowing her to process tactical data at superhuman speeds. Only 12 humans had ever been fitted with the prototype technology, and most of them hadn't survived the integration process. Sarah had not only survived, she had excelled. As she sealed her gear into a transport case, her personal communicator buzzed. A message from Marcus, smuggled out through channels she didn't want to think about too hard. "Mom, I know you're probably planning something crazy. Don't. I can survive this. I'll find a way to prove my innocence from inside. Please don't throw your life away for me. I love you. Sarah deleted the message after memorizing every word. Her son was brave, honorable, and hopelessly naive. The Xerian system wasn't interested in innocence or justice. They wanted a scapegoat for the mining consortium's problems, and they had chosen her boy because humans were still considered expendable by much of the galactic community. They were about to learn how wrong that assumption could be. The transport to Xerian Prime departed in 6 hours. Sarah had already booked passage under one of her many false identities, complete with documentation that would pass any security screening the aliens could devise. Let them try to stop Earth's deadliest operative from reaching her son. She had faced down battle fleets and walked through hellfire without flinching. A corrupt alien justice system was about to discover why humans had earned their reputation as the galaxy's most stubborn and resourceful species. The hunt was about to begin. The cargo hauler Distant Thunder dropped out of hyperspace with the subtle shudder that marked a successful jump. Sarah Chen sat in the passenger compartment, looking every inch the unremarkable freight coordinator her false documents claimed her to be. Gray hair pulled back in a simple bun, practical clothing, and the slightly weary expression of someone who had spent too many years moving cargo between star systems. The Xerian customs officials who boarded the ship saw exactly what they expected to see: another human worker, probably fleeing debt or a failed marriage, looking for a fresh start on the frontier. They scanned her identification, ran their standard background checks, and waved her through without a second glance. If they had looked closer, they might have noticed that her luggage was exactly within weight limits despite containing enough military hardware to level a city block. They might have wondered why a freight coordinator had reflexes fast enough to catch a falling datapad before it hit the ground. They might have questioned why her eyes constantly tracked exit routes and potential cover positions. But they didn't look closer. In Sarah's experience, most beings saw only what they wanted to see. Xerian Prime sprawled before the shuttle viewport like an infected wound on the planet's surface. The mining operations had carved vast scars into the landscape, leaving behind toxic pools and skeletal frameworks of extraction equipment. The main city clustered around the spaceport, a ugly collection of prefabricated structures and hastily constructed towers that spoke of quick profit rather than permanent settlement. The refugee camps sat on the outskirts, barely visible from the shuttle but clearly marked on Sarah's tactical display. Thousands of beings displaced by corporate expansion, living in conditions that would make a Terran prison seem luxurious. This was where Marcus had been working, trying to bring medical aid and basic supplies to families who had lost everything to Xerian greed. Sarah's neural interface processed the incoming data streams with cold efficiency. Guard patrol patterns, communication frequencies, structural blueprints of the detention center where they held her son. The Xerian authorities had made their security information surprisingly easy to access for someone with her particular skills. The shuttle touched down with a gentle thump, and passengers began filing out into the processed atmosphere of the terminal. Sarah moved with the crowd, just another tired human seeking opportunity on an alien world. Her luggage passed through security scanners that had been calibrated for Xerian technology. They completely missed the molecular-level modifications that turned her seemingly innocent tools into devastating weapons. The detention center sat on the northern edge of the city, a fortress of black metal and reinforced ceramics designed to hold the most dangerous criminals in this sector of space. According to the files Sarah had acquired during the journey, it currently housed 300 inmates across 7 levels, with Marcus being held in maximum security on level 5. Getting inside would require more than brute force. The Xerian guards were well-trained and heavily armed, backed up by automated defense systems that could turn the facility into a killing ground in seconds. This called for precision, timing, and the kind of patient planning that had made Sarah legendary among Terran special forces. She rented a room in a workers' hostel 3 blocks from the detention center, paying cash and avoiding the surveillance cameras with movements that seemed casual but were actually precisely calculated. The room was small, cheap, and perfect for her purposes. From the window, she had a clear line of sight to the prison's main entrance. For 72 hours, Sarah watched. She memorized shift changes, delivery schedules, and the habits of individual guards. She identified weak points in their security grid and traced power conduits that could be disrupted without triggering immediate alarms. She monitored their communications and learned the command codes that would give her access to restricted areas. The Xerian guards were competent professionals, but they had never faced anything like her. Human military doctrine emphasized adaptability and creative thinking in ways that most alien species found difficult to counter. Where they saw problems, she saw opportunities. On the fourth night, Sarah made her move. The maintenance tunnels beneath the city had been designed by a species that valued efficiency over security. Sarah had mapped every meter during her reconnaissance, identifying points where she could access the detention center's infrastructure without appearing on any sensors. Her modified tools made short work of access panels and security barriers. The first guard never saw her coming. One moment he was walking his routine patrol through the sub-basement. The next he was unconscious on the floor with Sarah wearing his uniform. The second guard noticed something was wrong when his partner failed to check in. But by then, Sarah had already accessed the security system and created a cascade of false alarms that sent response teams racing to empty areas of the facility. Level 5 was a maze of corridors and checkpoint barriers, designed to confuse and disorient anyone who didn't belong there. Sarah moved through it like water finding cracks in stone, her neural interface calculating optimal paths while her enhanced reflexes kept her ahead of the patrol patterns. Marcus was in cell 47C, a stark cubicle barely large enough for a human to lie down. When the door cycled open, he looked up with eyes that had already seen too much injustice. For a moment, he didn't recognize the Xerian guard standing in the doorway. "Mom, time to go, son." Sarah's voice was steady, professional, but Marcus could see the relief in her eyes. "We have approximately 14 minutes before they realize what's happening." "I can't leave. If I run, it proves their charges. I need to fight this." Sarah stepped into the cell, and for the first time Marcus saw past the uniform to the tactical gear hidden beneath. The legal system here isn't interested in justice. They want a scapegoat, and they've chosen you because they think humans won't fight back. "But if I escape? If you stay, you'll die in this cell while bureaucrats debate your fate." Sarah's neural interface was tracking incoming security responses, calculating diminishing windows of opportunity. "I've seen the evidence they manufactured. This isn't about guilt or innocence anymore. It's about getting you out alive." Marcus stared at her for a long moment, then nodded. He had inherited his mother's stubborn streak, but he wasn't stupid. The guards who had brought him here had made it clear that his life expectancy could be measured in weeks rather than years. The alarm klaxons began to wail as they moved through the corridors, Sarah's modified scanner showing her exactly where the response teams were converging. She had planned for this, creating multiple diversions and false trails that would keep the guards busy while she extracted her son. They were 3 levels from the exit when the first shots rang out. The Xerian security forces had finally realized that they weren't dealing with a prison riot or equipment malfunction. Someone was systematically dismantling their supposedly impregnable facility. Time to show them what Earth's deadliest killer could do when her family was threatened. The plasma bolt scorched the wall inches from Marcus's head, leaving a smoking crater in the reinforced ceramic. Sarah pushed him into a maintenance alcove and returned fire in one fluid motion, her weapon speaking with the precise authority of decades of combat experience. The Xerian guard who had fired the shot crumpled to the deck plating, his weapon clattering across the floor. "Stay low and follow my lead," Sarah commanded, her neural interface painting tactical overlays across her vision. The facility's security grid showed her exactly where the enemy forces were converging, their movements predictable and clumsy compared to human military precision. Marcus pressed against the wall beside her, his breathing rapid but controlled. "How many are there?" 47 guards on duty, 12 automated defense turrets, and a response team inbound from the security headquarters. Sarah's voice remained calm as she processed the tactical situation. "The good news is they're not coordinating effectively. The bad news is we're still outnumbered 15-1. She had faced worse odds during the Proxima conflict, but never with her son's life hanging in the balance. Every decision had to be perfect, every shot precisely placed. There was no room for error when Marcus was depending on her. The corridor ahead split into 3 directions. Sarah's enhanced hearing picked up the subtle sounds of boots on metal, weapons being readied, hushed commands being passed between guards. The Xerian forces were trying to box them in, using their superior numbers to overwhelm what they assumed was a desperate prisoner attempting escape. They had no idea they were hunting Earth's most decorated killer. Sarah pulled a small device from her utility belt, a piece of technology that officially didn't exist in any Terran military inventory. The neural disruptor had been designed for use against enemy command centers, capable of overloading alien nervous systems at a distance. She had modified this one to work through the facility's ventilation system. "Cover your nose and mouth," she told Marcus, activating the device and tossing it down the central corridor. Within seconds, confused shouts echoed from multiple directions as Xerian guards found their coordination failing, their enhanced senses overwhelmed by carefully tuned electromagnetic interference. They moved like ghosts through the chaos, Sarah leading the way with Marcus close behind. Her plasma rifle spoke only when necessary, each shot finding its target with mechanical precision. The Xerian guards were brave enough, but they had never faced an enemy who could predict their movements 3 steps ahead. The first automated turret deployed from its ceiling mount with a mechanical whir, its targeting sensors sweeping for hostile signatures. Sarah was ready for it, her modified scanner having mapped the defense grid during her reconnaissance. A precisely aimed shot disabled its primary sensor array, leaving it spinning uselessly while she and Marcus slipped past. "The exit is 2 levels down," Sarah said as they reached a service stairwell. Her neural interface was tracking response times, calculating how long before the Xerian authorities called for backup from the orbital defense platforms. "We have maybe 6 minutes before this gets really complicated." Marcus looked at her with a mixture of awe and terror. This wasn't the mother who had raised him, who had taught him to ride bikes and helped him with homework. This was the legendary soldier whose reputation made hardened mercenaries wake up in cold sweats. The Reaper, methodically dismantling a supposedly secure facility like she was solving a puzzle. The stairwell echoed with the sound of pursuit, guards calling coordinates and trying to establish a perimeter. Sarah dropped another device, this one a microexplosive that would collapse part of the stairwell behind them. Not enough to kill anyone, but sufficient to buy precious minutes while the security forces found alternate routes. Level 3 was where things got serious. The facility's main security station was here, along with the primary armory and communications center. Sarah had planned to avoid this area entirely, but the pursuing guards had forced them into a running battle that was drawing them deeper into the heart of the prison. The first concentrated volley of plasma fire lit up the corridor like a lightning storm. Sarah threw herself against the wall, pulling Marcus down beside her as superheated gas burned through the air where they had been standing. The Xerian guards had finally organized a proper ambush, using their knowledge of the facility to trap the intruders in a killing ground. "We need a distraction," Sarah muttered, checking her remaining equipment. The situation was deteriorating faster than her projections had indicated. Time for desperate measures. She activated her neural interface's combat protocol, feeling the familiar cold clarity that came with enhanced battlefield awareness. Time seemed to slow as her brain processed incoming data at superhuman speeds. Trajectory analysis showed her exactly where each guard was positioned, while predictive algorithms calculated their likely responses to different tactical scenarios. The plasma rifle in her hands became an extension of her will, each shot planned and executed with mechanical perfection. She leaned around the corner and opened fire, her enhanced reflexes allowing her to target 3 guards before they could react. The survivors dove for cover, their return fire wild and uncoordinated. "When I say go, run for that blast door," Sarah told Marcus, pointing to an emergency exit 50 meters down the corridor. "Don't look back, don't hesitate, just run." "What about you?" "I'll be right behind you." It wasn't entirely true, but Marcus didn't need to know that. Someone had to hold off the pursuit long enough for him to reach safety, and Sarah was the only one equipped for that kind of rearguard action. The security station's blast shields were starting to deploy, automated systems responding to the firefight by sealing off critical areas. Sarah had maybe 30 seconds before their escape route was cut off permanently, time enough for one last desperate gambit. She pulled her final explosive device, a shaped charge designed for breaching armored bunkers. In the confined space of the corridor, it would be devastating to anyone caught in the blast radius, including her if she wasn't careful about the timing. "Go," Sarah shouted, rising from cover and advancing toward the guard positions. Her plasma rifle chattered on full automatic, filling the air with deadly energy as she laid down suppressing fire. The Xerian guards fell back, intimidated by the sheer aggression of her assault. Marcus ran, his feet pounding against the deck plating as he sprinted for the blast door. Behind him, Sarah fought with the desperate fury of a mother defending her child, each shot a promise that anyone who threatened her son would pay the ultimate price. The shaped charge detonated with a roar that shook the entire level, filling the corridor with smoke and debris. When the dust cleared, the security station was a smoking ruin, and Sarah Chen was nowhere to be seen. Marcus reached the blast door just as it began to cycle shut, squeezing through the narrowing gap with seconds to spare. He found himself in a service tunnel that led to the facility's main power plant, emergency lighting casting eerie shadows on the walls. From somewhere behind him, he could hear the sounds of pursuit growing fainter. His mother had bought him the time he needed to escape, but at what cost? The woman who had raised him was also a warrior whose reputation stretched across the galaxy, and he was beginning to understand what that really meant. The tunnel stretched ahead into darkness, leading toward freedom and the uncertain future that waited beyond. But first, he had to trust that the Reaper would find her own way out of the hell she had created to save him. The explosion had done more than destroy the security station. As Sarah picked herself up from the rubble-strewn floor, her neural interface registered cascading failures throughout the facility's defensive systems. Emergency power was flickering, internal communications had been severed, and most importantly, the automated lockdown protocols had been disrupted. She was battered but functional, her armor having absorbed most of the blast's impact. A lesser soldier would have been killed by the shaped charge, but Sarah had calculated the exact placement needed to maximize destruction while minimizing personal risk. The Xerian guards who had been pursuing her were either unconscious or too stunned to offer immediate resistance. Her son was safe for now, but the real challenge was just beginning. The facility's external communications were still operational, which meant reinforcements would be arriving soon. Sarah needed to create enough chaos to cover Marcus's escape while finding her own way out of an increasingly hostile situation. The power plant's main reactor chamber was 3 levels down, its massive generators providing energy for the entire detention complex. If she could reach it undetected, Sarah could create a shutdown cascade that would blind the facility's sensors for hours. Without their technological advantages, the Xerian guards would be reduced to stumbling around in the dark, while she and Marcus disappeared into the underground tunnel system. The service corridors were a maze of pipes and conduits, dimly lit by emergency strips that cast dancing shadows on the walls. Sarah moved through them with the fluid grace of a predator, her enhanced senses alert for any sign of pursuit. The Xerian authorities were still trying to understand what had hit them, their response hampered by the communication blackout she had created. Her neural interface was tracking Marcus's progress through the escape route, showing him as a green blip moving steadily toward the city's outskirts. He was following the path she had programmed into his temporary comm unit, staying ahead of the search teams that were beginning to spread out from the facility. The boy was learning to think like a soldier, adapting to circumstances that would have broken most civilians. The reactor chamber was a cathedral of humming machinery, its fusion cores casting blue light on walls lined with control systems and monitoring equipment. Sarah had studied the schematics during her preparation, identifying exactly which systems needed to be disabled to create maximum disruption without causing a catastrophic meltdown. The last thing she wanted was to turn Xerian Prime into a radioactive wasteland. The first guard she encountered was a maintenance technician, more concerned with keeping the reactors stable than watching for intruders. Sarah's sleeper hold rendered him unconscious within seconds, his body settling gently to the deck plating without triggering any alarms. She appropriated his access codes and security clearances, adding them to her growing collection of stolen credentials. The main control console was a work of art, its crystalline displays showing the intricate dance of matter and energy that powered the detention facility. Sarah's fingers moved across the interface with surgical precision, introducing subtle modifications that would cascade into system-wide failures over the next several hours. To anyone watching, It would look like routine maintenance checks rather than deliberate sabotage. The emergency klaxons began wailing just as she finished the last sequence, their harsh notes echoing through the reactor chamber. Someone had finally discovered the extent of the damage upstairs, and security teams were being deployed throughout the facility. Sarah had perhaps 10 minutes before they reached her current position. She made her way to a maintenance shaft that led directly to the city's water treatment plant, a route she had identified during her reconnaissance as the least likely to be monitored. The Xerian authorities were focused on the obvious escape routes, never suspecting that Earth's most dangerous operative would disappear into their municipal infrastructure. The treatment plant was exactly as advertised, a collection of filtration pools and chemical processing units that turned raw sewage into something approaching drinkable water. Sarah emerged from the maintenance tunnel covered in industrial grime, but effectively invisible to the security forces that were cordoning off the detention facility. Marcus was waiting at the rendezvous point, an abandoned warehouse on the edge of the industrial district. When Sarah appeared from the shadows, he barely recognized the figure approaching him. Her stolen guard uniform was torn and scorched, her face streaked with dirt and smoke, but her eyes held the cold satisfaction of a mission accomplished. "Are you hurt?" were the first words out of his mouth, the sun overriding the rescued prisoner. "Nothing that won't heal." Sarah checked her chronometer, calculating their remaining window of opportunity. "We have maybe 2 hours before they establish a proper search perimeter. Time to disappear." The escape plan she had developed involved multiple phases, each designed to put more distance between them and their pursuers. The first phase was already in motion. A cargo hauler she had arranged under false credentials was preparing for departure from the secondary spaceport, its manifest listing them as mining equipment bound for the outer colonies. But getting to the spaceport required crossing half the city, while every security force on the planet was looking for them. The Xerian authorities might be corrupt and incompetent, but they weren't stupid. They would have roadblocks at every major intersection and surveillance drones sweeping the likely escape routes. "We're not going to run," Sarah announced, opening her equipment case and revealing a collection of items that made Marcus's eyes widen. "We're going to hide in plain sight." The disguise technology was another piece of equipment that officially didn't exist, a holographic projector that could alter their apparent species and physical characteristics. Within minutes, Sarah had transformed them both into Xerian civilians, complete with the subtle biological signatures that would fool most scanning equipment. They walked through the city as refugees seeking passage off-world, just another pair among thousands who were trying to escape the corporate oppression that had turned Xerian Prime into an economic wasteland. The security forces ignored them completely, their attention focused on hunting for dangerous human terrorists rather than displaced aliens seeking better lives elsewhere. The cargo hauler, Stellar Wanderer, was exactly where Sarah had arranged for it to be, its captain a grizzled independent trader who asked no questions as long as the payment cleared. The ship's manifest listed them as indentured workers being transported to mining operations in the Kepler sector, documentation that would satisfy any customs inspection. As the ship lifted off from Xerian Prime, Marcus stood at the viewport watching the planet fall away beneath them. The detention facility was still visible as a black smudge on the landscape, emergency vehicles swarming around it like insects around a disturbed hive. "What happens now?" he asked. Sarah was already planning their next moves, her neural interface processing intelligence reports and calculating safe havens where they could disappear while the diplomatic consequences played out. "Now we prove your innocence the hard way. The evidence exists somewhere in the Xerian corporate databases, and I intend to find it. That could take years. They'll never stop hunting us. Then they'll learn what it means to hunt humans." Sarah's smile was cold and predatory, the expression that had made her legendary among enemy forces across the galaxy. "The Xerian Mining Consortium made a critical error when they decided to frame my son. They assumed that one human family couldn't threaten their entire operation." Through the viewport, the stars beckoned with infinite possibilities. Somewhere out there was the truth that would clear Marcus's name and expose the corruption that had condemned him. Finding it would require all of Sarah's skills and more than a little luck. But the Reaper had never failed a mission yet, and she wasn't about to start now. 6 months later, Sarah Chen sat in a Galactic Council hearing chamber. watching the faces of alien judges as the evidence played out before them. The holographic displays showed financial records, communications logs, and surveillance footage that painted a damning picture of corporate conspiracy and judicial corruption. The Xerian Mining Consortium's executives sat at the defendant's table, their confidence having evaporated as Sarah systematically dismantled their carefully constructed lies. What they had dismissed as the desperate actions of one human mother had turned into a relentless investigation that exposed decades of criminal activity. Marcus testified from the witness stand, his voice steady as he described the conditions in the refugee camps and the consortium's efforts to drive away anyone who might interfere with their operations. The young man who had been convicted of terrorism 6 months ago now stood, revealed as exactly what he had always been, an idealistic humanitarian trying to help the helpless. The evidence Sarah had gathered painted a clear picture of what had really happened. The mining platform explosions had been the work of corporate saboteurs, designed to provide justification for evicting the refugee populations and seizing their land. Marcus had been chosen as a scapegoat because his human heritage made him an easy target in a legal system that viewed his species as expendable. "The defendant Marcus Chen is hereby cleared of all charges," announced the Chief Justice, her crystalline voice carrying across the chamber. "Furthermore, this council finds evidence of systematic corruption within the Xerian legal system and recommends immediate sanctions against the mining consortium." Sarah allowed herself a small smile as the gallery erupted in celebration. The months of investigation had been grueling, requiring her to infiltrate corporate databases, track down witnesses, and compile evidence while avoiding the bounty hunters that the consortium had sent after them. But every sleepless night had been worth it to see the vindication in her son's eyes. The consortium executives were led away in restraints, their corporate empire crumbling around them as news of their crimes spread throughout the galaxy. The refugee camps on Xerian Prime would receive compensation and resettlement assistance, while reforms to the planetary legal system would prevent future abuses of justice. Admiral Morrison was waiting for them outside the council chambers, his expression mixing relief with professional admiration. "Quite a operation, Captain Chen. The intelligence services are calling it the most successful infiltration mission in recent memory." "It wasn't about the mission," Sarah replied, watching Marcus speak with reporters about the humanitarian crisis that had started this whole ordeal. "It was about protecting my family. The Defense Corps would like you to consider returning to active duty. Your skills are needed now more than ever." Sarah considered the offer for a moment, then shook her head. "I think I'm done being humanity's sword. There are other ways to serve." The Xerian incident had changed her perspective on what really mattered. For decades, she had fought humanity's enemies across the galaxy, earning a reputation that struck fear into the hearts of those who threatened her species. But the most important battle had been much simpler, a mother protecting her child from injustice. Marcus approached them, his conversation with the media finished for now. The experience had aged him, adding steel to his character while leaving his essential humanity intact. He had seen the worst that the galaxy could offer, but he hadn't let it break his faith in fighting for what was right. "The Refugee Assistance Program wants me to head their new oversight committee," he told them, "making sure this kind of thing doesn't happen again." "Good," Sarah said. "The galaxy needs people like you watching over it." "People like you too," Marcus replied. "The consortium's victims want to thank the woman who brought them justice." Sarah shook her head. "They don't need to thank me. I was just doing what any parent would do." But that wasn't entirely true, and they all knew it. What Sarah had accomplished went far beyond normal parental protection. She had taken on an entire corporate empire with nothing but her skills, her determination, and her absolute refusal to accept injustice. In doing so, she had demonstrated the qualities that made humanity both feared and respected throughout the galaxy. The species that had conquered the stars through sheer stubborn willpower had produced a mother who would burn down worlds to protect her child. The Xerian Mining Consortium had learned that lesson the hard way, and their downfall would serve as a warning to others who might consider targeting human families. As they walked through the corridors of the Galactic Council building, Sarah reflected on the changes the past months had brought. Her son had found his calling as an advocate for the powerless, while she had discovered that retirement didn't necessarily mean the end of her service to others. The galaxy was full of injustice, corruption, and those who preyed upon the weak. There would always be another Xerian mining consortium, another corrupt official, another innocent person who needed someone to fight for them. Sarah Chen had spent her career eliminating humanity's enemies with precision and skill. Maybe it was time to start eliminating humanity's problems instead. The stars beckoned through the council building's vast windows, holding infinite possibilities for those brave enough to reach for them. Earth's deadliest killer had become something new, a protector of the innocent, a seeker of truth, and a reminder that some bonds could never be broken. They had convicted her son and thought that would be the end of it. Instead, they had awakened something far more dangerous than any soldier, a mother's love backed by the skills to make that love into a weapon. The Reaper was dead. In her place stood something the galaxy had never seen before, a guardian angel with the training to make miracles happen and the determination to never let injustice go unpunished. Marcus was safe, the truth had prevailed, and Sarah Chen had found a new purpose among the stars. The galaxy was about to become a much more dangerous place for those who threatened the innocent. And that was exactly as it should be.